What is going on, everybody? Welcome back here to the channel. I'm Sean Davis, and welcome in to the reveal. My number 17th ranked team in my NBA preseason power rankings with a deep dive into the Los Angeles Clippers. Really excited for this episode, guys. We do have to do a bit of housekeeping before we get started, but before we even do that, make sure you guys hit that like button and subscribe here to the channel. If you are new, it takes 2 seconds. Great way to support the channel as we continue this series, get into the rest of our NBA offseason content, and really ramp up here as the season gets going. Please don't go anywhere. At the end of this breakdown, I have a very, very special guest, and my guy Jamal Christopher was able to come on and break down this Clippers team with me. I had a blast being able to talk Clippers basketball with them for an unhealthy amount of time, but as a Laker fan. But all jokes aside, Jamal's my guy, and really, really excited to be able to get him on. And we do have a fun Clippers team to break down. But first, the obvious question is, well, Sean, what about 2019 and 18? I put a tweet out on my Twitter that due to trying to speed the process up a bit, I was going to, just reveal those 3 teams. So massive, massive, massive apologies to Heat, Kings, and Rockets fans. As you guys can see here on our graphic, those 3 teams were the 3 teams before the Clippers, and they started off this new tier for me of teams I think have playoff aspirations. Don't know what they do when they get to the playoffs, but I think these teams all have playoff aspirations one way or another, whether it's getting it by the play-in or outright or whatever, right? So again, massive apologies to those 3 particular fan bases, and make sure I especially hone in on their coverage during the season to try to make up for it. Especially teams like the Kings and the Heat. Was really, really looking forward to those episodes, but due to the nature of the series, trying to get this done, just wasn't able to do it. But now that we got kind of that stuff out of the way, let's take a look here at our nice graphic. Like I said, the Clippers, they come in here at number 17, and they are right in the middle. We're getting closer and closer here. It's very, very small differences now between these teams. The Clippers, 81.410 grade for me. It's again, the margin is so slim that the team ahead of them has an 81.480. We are getting to the nitty gritty of this, guys. The margins are going to be smaller and smaller. We're going to be really, really nitpicking and critiquing these teams as we do really, really start to get into my playoff teams and championship teams. It's going to be really small things to separate teams from being title contenders and playoff teams that can maybe make a run. So let's get started here by taking a look at the offseason for this Clippers team. This is going to be a shorter breakdown as a whole because we do the interview with my guy Jamal is a little bit on the longer end. Don't want to bore you guys to a certain extent with Clippers content or just with 2 hours could be a long time. So really, really appreciate you guys following me here. But like I said, let's start things off with their offseason. A very, very busy Clipper offseason. They lose Paul George at free agency for essentially nothing. And that whole situation, and I talked about with my guy Jamal, look, I completely understand it, right? Like the decision to kind of let him go, or not even let him go, because I think in a best case scenario, the Clippers would have wanted to bring him back, but at the detriment of paying him all that money to be as honestly unreliable as he is as a number 2 option, where honestly, he got somebody was going to pay Paul George. So he got his money while also being in probably the best case scenario for him, which is as a 3rd option, which I think is probably the best for him right now. Paul George as a number 2 at this point is fine, but you really, really love it if he's your 3rd option. And so again, I understand the reliability with the health, the lack of, because I think in an ideal world, you will love your number 2 to be able to be a number 1 when it really matters, or at least semi-consistently. And I think 2024 Paul George isn't that level of number 2 anymore, where he can turn into a number 1, in a playoff series. Kind of like Tyrese Maxey did, where Maxey was the 76ers best player, for an example. And honestly, Harden was this team's best player in that Maverick series when Kawhi Leonard wasn't available. So I understand it. Again, a best case scenario, if you told the Clippers, hey, well, you guys have to pay Paul George $35 million. I have a hard time, imagining that, double checking here what the Sixers are paying Paul George. Yeah, the Sixers are paying Paul George $50 million. Also, over the course of the next 4 seasons, like Paul George is going to be in his age 38 season, and he's going to be making $57 million damn near. So I completely understand it is well more than justified looking at that, cap hit in his age 38 season with his health and saying, do we really want to pigeonhole ourselves to this trio that all have injury concerns at one way or another? All are in their early to mid 30s, and they're all going to finish their contract in their late 30s, and definitely not the player that dollar amount will warrant. So I understand it from the Clippers standpoint. And again, for the long term outlook at the Clippers, this is probably the best thing they could have done, but it still sucks you weren't able to get him for anything after you traded the whole franchise for him, not named Kawhi Leonard. And by the way, the Clippers, if they didn't already lose the trade, they did officially kind of concede that trade too. Once they did let Paul George walk for nothing. And then outside of that, like they lose Russell Westbrook at free agency, and I don't want to come off as a Russell Westbrook hater because then the Russ dance will be sent on me. While Russ will have the occasional good game, I do think Russell Westbrook now is really just a name, and that sounds harsh, but I'm just being honest with you guys here. With Russell Westbrook, I think, and the Nuggets fans are ironically going through this phase right now where, there's that brief moment, not even moment, pretty much last the entire offseason where like, oh, you talk yourself into Russell Westbrook as a player. He has some good stretches, and then eventually by the end of the season, you kind of like, yeah, please get him off my team. And you start to realize that he's not conducive to winning in 2024. And I completely understand losing him, letting him walk in. If we're being completely honest, they might have upgraded in some regards here with their additions this offseason. They lose Mason Plumlee. That's a very underrated addition, especially with who they like replaced them with. They replaced them with whatever's left of Mo Bamba. And I say that because I just don't think Mo Bamba is a good basketball player. And then they bring in Kai Jones, who, if we're talking about unreliability, somehow he is damn near at the top of that list, and like the unpredictability factors into that as well. So very, very, and they really couldn't do anything about it either, which is, kind of unfortunate on their part. You look at Mason Plumlee. Oh wait, no, yeah, no, never mind. No, I don't know why I was tripping. They definitely could have. He's on a $2 million vet minimum contract from the Phoenix Suns. So it's an underrated. And Mason Plumlee isn't great, but comparatively speaking, like I would much rather have Mason Plumlee on this team than Mo Bamba and Kai Jones as my backups. But like I said, busy offseason because they do bring in a lot of additions to the point where I can't even won't fit everybody in on this screen. The biggest acquisitions, Derrick Jones Jr., Chris Dunn. I like those margin moves, very quickly replacing, if you will, the losses of Paul George and Russell Westbrook. And there isn't a true 1-for-1 replacement for Paul George, but bringing in Derrick Jones Jr. after the season he just had, I really, really support that idea. You get him in here on a really solid contract, a 3-year, roughly like around the $30 million range for Derrick Jones Jr. I think it's really, really going to contribute to this defense that when I first put my grades together, I was actually kind of sleeping on. And he's going to allow this team to have so much more scheme versatility now in the half court because he, along with Terrence Mann, who we'll talk about in a sec, they could take on the opposing team's best players and let Kawhi Leonard be a helper and a roamer and be this just ball hawk. And then in a pinch, can obviously still guard on the perimeter of the best of them in certain situations. So I'm a big fan of the Derrick Jones Jr. acquisition. Can attack closeouts really, really nicely as well. I think he can eat next to Harden if the shot's falling at a semi-consistent rate. And then they bring in Chris Dunn, another guy that is a really freaking good defender. Like the pressure and like how he plays at the point of attack, this team just quite frankly hasn't had. And again, that is Chris Dunn, is Terrence Mann, it's Derek Jones Jr., it's Kawhi Leonard, and Ivica Zubac we'll talk about obviously too. Like, this team has legitimate defensive talent here. And it's gonna be a really, really fun watch this season, watching, Ty Lue kind of cook with this group. Then they draft my guy, Cam Christie, who I think I'm just a fan at this point of the Christie family. I was a big Max Christie fan when he came out of Michigan State. And Cam Christie, another one and done. I do think, similarly to his brother Max, he could have benefited from returning back to Minnesota for one more year. But drafted here to the Clippers, I don't know how much he'll play right now in year one. But if an injury happens, it's a really, really nice pick in the second round. And the guy then a couple of years, similarly to his brother, I think can be a rotation player for this team. Good value, in my opinion. Had him in the 40s on my board. And I really, really, really liked Cam Christie coming out. And then, like I said, they bring in Mo Bamba, Kevin Porter Jr., and Kai Jones, all a bunch of like just okay, I guess. I mean, Kevin Porter Jr. is a creep. And then they bring in Kai Jones and Mo Bamba, who, I mean, again, I'm really disappointed with the backup big room, and that's something I'm a little bit worried about here. But let's dive in now to our roster breakdown here and break down these players position by position, player by player, if you will. And we do have some new stuff I wanted to detail to you guys. So a part of the series, as you guys can see here, I'm featuring it on the screen right now. We do have like a superstar multiplier, if you will, for this series, that any team that has a player that's a star, which would be 84 to 88 overall, superstar 89 to 94 overall, or an elite player 95 to 99 overall. We have not done any elite players yet, but we're getting to the superstars here, as you guys can see with Kawhi Leonard. I think that it would be fun to show you guys off like the superstar multiplier. And essentially how this works is, so Kawhi Leonard, for a very perfect example, actually, Kawhi Leonard is a 91 overall. Well, then you also have to multiply that. You multiply the overall team grade times 0.35 per 0.035%, and that gives this Clippers team a boost. It's not a big boost, but it's actually enough that can really elevate a team from one spot to another, especially if they have multiple players. So the Clippers get a superstar boost for Kawhi Leonard, and they also get a star player boost for James Harden, which is 0.015%. So the Clippers do get some help from Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. And a quick sidetrack before we continue: 0.35%, 0.15% boot multiplier for Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. And the Clippers, they also get a decent boost as well from Tyronn Lue, and that helps them out and helps get them here to the 17th ranking. So let me know if you guys like that idea, if you guys want me to continue to include this graphic here, explaining the multiplier for the teams going forward. But now let's get into this roster breakdown here. And the conversation obviously starts with Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard, I put a tweet on X, on Twitter or whatever, at Sean_DABI. And the point was that Kawhi Leonard, despite the fact that he was a second team All NBA player last season, Kawhi Leonard legitimately had an underrated season last season. And I understand why it's underrated. It's because of the injury, because of the fact that he played in one playoff game last season, and because of the fact that Kawhi Leonard has only played since the bubble, he's only played in one full playoff series for this Clippers organization since he's been here. He played the entire bubble, obviously, but he got a break before that. And then he played the next year, which would have been the 2020-2021 season. He played in that first round matchup against Dallas, which went 7 games. Outside of that, Kawhi Leonard has largely been unavailable come April and May. And trust me, me and Jamal, we talk a lot about that. So again, I understand why Kawhi Leonard is honestly maybe getting a little bit underrated, because the conversation is always the same at this point with Kawhi. It's for the love of God, be healthy come April and May. That's all. This only when it matters most. But you have talking heads like Stephen A. Smith on ESPN and a bunch of these other just flat out idiots. And I'm being honest here, like idiots in terms of their basketball analysis, that say, "Oh, you're the most disappointing superstar ever." Like, dog, he's a 2-time champ still at the end of the day. And skill set wise, is one of the few players in the entire league that you could say, get him to the playoffs healthy, and I don't care. And I compared it to a very Lakers like situation where it's get Bron to the playoffs. So like Nuggets, it's get Jokic to the playoffs, get Steph to the playoffs, and you just bank on their resume. And Kawhi Leonard is one of the best playoff risers ever. It's like him, it's Bron. Those two guys are consistently, Luka even at this point is a ridiculous playoff player. Like, consistently get these guys to the freaking playoffs healthy, and you just take it at that point. Like, whatever happens, happens. And I think that's where this Clippers team is at. Like, if Kawhi can play 60 plus games, but like gets to the playoffs healthy, then this team, with the combination of Tyronn Lue's coaching, who I guess you can kind of talk on right now, I think Ty Lue does not get enough credit. And I'm gonna make sure I circle back to Kawhi. But while we're on the Ty Lue tangent, he doesn't really get the credit he deserves, I feel. As you guys can see here, I have him ranked in my tier 2 of NBA coaches, ranking with the B plus grade, if you will, 3rd to 7th for me. We talked about Greg Popovich already. He's firmly in that tier of coaches for me. And he kind of suffers from like post LeBron coach syndrome, as Eric Spoelstra kind of did, where it's, oh no, that guy's only good because he coached LeBron or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, where it's no, I mean, yes, he did coach LeBron James, and yes, that honestly probably helped Tyronn Lue, and honestly probably helped Tyronn Lue prepare for his situation here in LA, where he is coaching, when healthy, one of the 10 best players on the planet still. And a superstar tandem even for his entire tenure here with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Now you added in James Harden. And I think that Ty Lue, first off, if we're talking about like an individual game and I need somebody to just scheme up something for me, Ty Lue's near the top of the list for me in terms of coaches I would want on my team in a game 7 scenario. Ty Lue's near the top of the list, to be completely honest here. I think the offensive play calling, some of the freelance stuff, I do think they freelance a lot here in LA, but I think in general, just his basketball and offensive mind in general, I think is top tier. Like, the amount of shit I steal from Tyronn Lue as a coach is honestly crazy. And I also think that this team with Ty Lue, they add Jeff Van Gundy to the staff actually this season as well, this offseason as well. They can get really, really versatile scheme wise, which I don't think we've really been able to see Ty Lue tap into a ton. Like, they will switch a lot, but they'll also play a lot of drop with Zubac. But they have really, really, really good defensive personnel now. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But making the rounds back to Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard, and I do think, like, obviously, right? He is not the same defender he was back in his prime. Like, back in his prime, he put together some of the greatest stretches, like three like singular season stretches in a row of dominant defensive play of this generation or this era. He was really spectacular, but last season was actually his best defensive season since his Defensive Player of the Year campaign. And if he was, if he won all NBA defense honors, honestly, they would have been justified. He had his best season again since the 20 in general. He had his best season in terms of estimated wins added, per dunks and threes since that 2017 Spurs season, which a lot of people talk about all the time being like the best version of Kawhi Leonard. Well, that's how freaking good he was last season. Still a top 10 player if fully healthy, and more than justifiably. Like he earns this 91 overall grade for me. Another thing that I didn't really explain, but we got the overall grades in the bottom left corner. We have the offensive grades in the top right corner, and we have our defensive grades in the top left corner. The defensive grade is a letter grade. The offense and the overall grade is a rating, or is a number rather. So last bit of housekeeping there. But continuing on to Kawhi Leonard, he was literally the best offensive player in the league. The best isolation player in the league last season, where still there is arguably nobody in the league that does a better job of just getting to their spots. And when you let them get to their spots, it's game over. Nobody does that better than Kawhi Leonard. Nobody. Like, not Jalen Brunson, not SGA, and that's like crazy. I'm saying that. Not Luka. Like, you let Kawhi Leonard get to a spot, it's good luck, right? Now he does have the insane volume or whatever, right? At time, but 96 percentile in isolation scoring possession usage. Freaking insane. He's, from where he started, he's incredibly developed as a playmaker now, where if you do send help, he is more than willing to make that pass and help negate some of that help. Now, is that still probably the way to beat him? Yeah, you would much rather Kawhi, beat you with his playmaking, if you will, than beat you with his dominant scoring. But, you just got to pick your poison there, literally. I do think I would honestly like to see Kawhi Leonard, and this is, again, very, very small nitpick. I would like to see Kawhi Leonard kind of get to the rim a little bit more, get back to like Toronto levels of, rim field goal attempts per 75 possessions. Last season, 4.4 rim field goal attempts per 75 possessions, which is actually a step up from what it was the previous season, which was 3.7. Obviously, we talk about a guy that lives in the mid-range game as much as Kawhi does. That's going to tank those numbers just a little bit. And Kawhi never has been this insanely high rim shot diet guy. Going back actually to that Toronto season, that's his best season in his career in terms of rim field goal attempts per 75 possessions, which is 6.1. Can we get to that 5.5 range and really feast at the rim and feast getting to the paint a little bit more? And that, I think, can only open things up for this team's offense even more. Because when he does get there, he is a guy that, is a great finisher. Obviously has the athletic build to finish through contact, to explode up and not really, worry about that. Can also draw contact and things like that. If you look at B-ball indexes, ability to finish through contact finish rate, 83rd percentile. So he is good at kind of absorbing contact and finishing. It's more so, can we get there? And unassisted. So how many shots is he creating for himself at the rim? 1.8 per 75 possessions, which is in the 47th percentile. So sorry to throw a bunch of numbers at you guys, but you would just like to see Kawhi improve a little bit there. He is a good offensive rebounder. 74th percentile in offensive rebound success rate per B-ball index, which is, by the way, probably the best analytical site. Think of it like PFF for basketball, honestly. So I can't say much else more about Kawhi Leonard. He's fantastic. The pairing of him and Ty Lue is a big freaking reason why this team is ranked 17th and not lower. But yeah. Moving on, James Harden. Oh, and again, defensively, let's talk about James Harden. Kawhi Leonard a little bit more defensively. Like I said, he had his best defensive season since his Defensive Player of the Year campaign. He still has insane instincts, which he's always gonna be until he just loses all his athleticism. there's not gonna be a day where I'm like worried about Kawhi Leonard being a competent defender. Because again, the instincts, the hands, the frame, everything in general about Kawhi Leonard just raves. Like it just speaks good defender or good baseline for being a good defender. Um, but again, with the new scheme versatility, not scheme versatility, but the defensive talent, which will allow for said scheme versatility, with Kawhi and with this Clippers team in general. Um, Kawhi can guard on the ball still at the best of them in stretches. But now you get to really tap into him being this off-ball roamer and helper and tap into those instincts more, maybe be a little bit more not creative. Get well defensively as scheme-wise, get more creative, but get more opportunities to force and create turnovers. That's really what I'm looking for there. And I'm really, really excited because again, Kawhi Leonard, one of the best defenders of the past decade. So, especially best wing defenders. Love the versatility with Kawhi. Kawhi also has incredible technique to guard ball screens and guard in one-on-one isolation, like I said, in a pinch. But the hope is that, you have a guy like you have a guy like Derrick Jones Jr. that could kind of take the load off him just a little bit. And, you can really tap into the help defense and things like that from Kawhi Leonard. So really, really excited to watch Kawhi play this season. And I think this team is banking on him taking some more shots than he also has years prior as well, where Kawhi Leonard in recent years, Kawhi Leonard last year, 17 shots a game, the year prior, 16.8, the full season prior, 17 and a half in the year before that. His first year here, 19.9, so almost 20 shots a game. Do we get Kawhi Leonard getting back to like the 20 shots a game territory where you could see him averaging a little bit closer to 27 points per game? Because honestly, if somebody said that last season was the best year Kawhi has had as a Clipper, I think they have a legitimate argument in terms of just regular season play. Now, once again, you have that playoff run in 2021 where he didn't play in the second round, but I mean, good grief, that first round against Dallas, game 6, 45 points, like, that could be the best individual performance of Kawhi as a Clipper. But yeah, enough of Kawhi there. We got to move on to James Harden, James Harden at his peak is one of the most scheme-proof players of not all time, but of the generation for sure, where it almost didn't matter, where James Harden is this high volume ISO, high volume pick and roll guy, and the pick and rolls actually blend into the ISOs a little bit because you could switch it and Harden will just ISO you to death from there. And for a severely long time, it was shit. We don't want to switch because now we have a big or maybe a bad defender guarding him in space. And that's just not conducive to our defensive success. And then, okay, we play drop. You have the floater. You have the ability to just get downhill and finish at the rim. You have the pull-up game out of it. You have the generational passing ability out of pick and rolls as well, and drop and things like that, to where the goal of drop is to keep it as 2-on-2 as possible, where now we have to pull a backside helper to tag on the roll too, and let James really pick you apart then. Or if you hedge, you put 2 on the ball or anything like that, then prime James Harden, that's a death sentence. Where now it's, in my opinion, at least fairly obvious the way you beat James Harden and kind of limit his productivity. And I'm curious to see if teams eventually pick up on it. Like, very sparingly did teams really use it. I know the Lakers used it in one particular game where I was shouting it out from the mountaintops at one point. I'm like, hey, this is pregame mind. I'm like, you know what? 2024, or maybe at that point it was still 2023, you got to live with James Harden ISO attempts. And the Lakers get blasted for 3 quarters. And then Bron says, F that. We're going to switch stuff now. We're going to be a little more switchy. And we're going to live with Harden ISOing against his space. And it sounds crazy to even think those words 3 years ago. But that's just where we're at in 2024, because the combination of all the hamstring injuries and just age, he just turned 35 years old. He doesn't have the burst or with the ball in his hands in terms like the handle still is good, but in terms of the ultra quick handle, right? Or the explosiveness to blow by his defender and get to the rim. He doesn't have that anymore. So when you factor all that into the equation here, why wouldn't you switch, right? Because again, one of the best parts about peak Harden was he was getting to the rim at will, or he could at least get to the rim at will. Nowadays, if you switch on a Harden, it's almost you like still pack the lane and make him see bodies. It is an almost guaranteed step back jumper. So that's where the point begins to come up. Where do teams finally recognize that? And I don't think we would ever see that until sometime in the playoffs. And again, you still have to have the personnel to be able to do this. But like a Minnesota, for example, we really struggled at. I could see a OKC this year potentially being able to pull that off, right? These teams that have the ability to get ultra switchy, I think can really, really cause nightmares for this Clippers team and turn James Harden into a scorer where because he's not getting downhill, he is relying for you to put two on the ball or play drop and suck out of the man in a rotation for whatever reason. Because I do think this team is actually going to rely on James Harden a ton to set the table for these guys. And that's actually where you probably are going to miss Russell Westbrook the most, because as turnover like prone as he can be, Russ still can help set the table for these guys. As a matter of fact, I'll go kind of one step further. If this Clippers team made a deadline acquisition for like a Tyus Jones or whatever, maybe that's a bad example because Tyus is in Phoenix now. I don't really see Phoenix trading him, especially not to a interconference rival. Especially with the rumors that they might even go as far as starting Tyus Jones. But you get what I'm saying. These table setting point guards as a backup, like ironically, this team could really use Chris Paul right now. That's like admittedly hilarious. But because I do worry about that now. Because if teams are smart and begin to switch a ton and tell Harden, hey, you're gonna have to beat us with the scoring, and we're just gonna stay up front, we're gonna show bodies, you have to shoot 10 step back threes a game. I don't think that's very good for the Clippers' chances of winning games. Now, again, I don't think that's something you see a ton in the regular season because that now allows like Ty and Kawhi and James to counter. But that's something to keep an eye out on. And there's just quite frankly not a ton of teams that really can do that. Like the Knicks with OG and Mikal could probably get away with it. But even then, like I think there's a way they could kind of run into some trouble. The Thunder, the Magic, that's the Eastern Conference team though. The Wolves, like I mentioned, so it is more specific matchups, but it is something to keep an eye out on. Now, with that being said, let's get off the doom and gloom train or doom and gloom bus here with James Harden, because he is still a ridiculously efficient playmaker. Like that's just a fact. He is. His process or his ability, the gravity that he still can create at times with the ball in his hands is truly special, where there isn't a pass James Harden can't make on a basketball floor, quite frankly. Great shooter still. And that's obviously where like his best traits are. And if you look at any advanced metrics and things like that, the playmaking going back to that is freaking ridiculous. Like I'm going to try to flash this B-ball index graphic here that I'm looking at here. It's nuts. The versatility of passes, the passing, the playmaking talent in general, 100th percentile. He's literally still one of the best playmakers in the league. I would say he's tier 2 of a playmaker. He's like LaMelo Ball-ish level. Like I think LaMelo's like at the top of tier 2, because for me, tier 1 is Luka, Trey, Hallie, Jokic. All right, tier 2 is still probably James Harden, LaMelo, Braun, things like that. Braun has had some sneaky turnover problems recently. That's the reason why he gets docked. So, Laker fans, don't kill me. But James Harden still provides a lot of value. And I think in the regular season, where this team is desperately going to need some shot creation, James Harden, I think, can still create some of that stuff for you. And as the number 2 option now, clear-cut number 2 option, he's not competing with anybody on this team. You can see James Harden. I grade him out still, I think, fairly nice. I give him an 87 offensive grade, which means I still view him as a all-star caliber offensive talent. Whether or not we see that or not is to be determined. And I think, honestly, this Clippers team sees it might be banking on James Harden being still a fringe or, even all-star caliber offensive player for this team that at least in the regular season can, set the table for everybody. You know, if it's a game Kawhi misses, can, maybe even elevate his game for a one night instance and, have old flashes of old James Harden and help put the team on his back one more time and win them a couple of games without Kawhi. But because that's what this team needs. This team needs that from James Harden. Because that is going to ultimately help Kawhi get to the playoffs. And you get the Clippers to the playoffs and Kawhi is healthy. Okay, cool. We'll deal with the game 4 Harden disappointment because we have Kawhi. And Harden was, for games 1 through 4 last season, he was really, really good in the playoffs against Dallas. You still had game 4 of that Dallas series where James Harden said, no, we are not losing it, put the team on his back and was balling when Paul George kind of looked like he wasn't interested or didn't want to be there or was shying away from the moment. So James Harden, if he's your worst defender, I think you feel pretty fine about that. Like I mentioned, you have really, really good defensive pieces around him. With Ivica Zubac being the first guy I really want to highlight here. Really, really good defensive player. It's actually underrated, I think, as a defensive big. And it's because I think there is a very nasty narrative around pretty much all drop coverage bigs that are not named Anthony Davis. And that's only because AD is a still pretty scheme versatile guy. Yeah, they don't have the best mobility in the world. So if you are able to isolate them in space, sure, like it will be problematic for you at times as a defense. But for freaking crying out loud, like it's the same thing with Rudy. Obviously not to that scale because Rudy, I think, is one of the 5 best defenders in the league. But the narrative around drop coverage bigs, like Rudy specifically, or even Zubac, you'll see at times, like, oh man, he sucks. Shows clip of them getting fried by Luka or SGA or Jalen Brunson in space. Dog, we're talking about specifically like for Luka example, like Rudy Gobert stinks for getting cooked by Luka. That's the best offensive player in the league. That's not like, are we just so numb, I guess, to like we just don't want to see good defense anymore. Because I think what Zubac does well, I give him a B plus for defense. Because I think what he does well, despite not being this ultra scheme versatile guy, I think he's a good post defender. He's a good defensive rebounder, and he's a good drop coverage big and a good rim protector. Like that as your big, who cares? I will take that and I will live with the fact that he isn't the most screen friendly player all the time or scheme versatile friendly player all the time. Right. I'm just going to have to live with that. Right. Because I know that when it comes to being able to protect the rim as a shot blocker and rim deterrent, that, Ivica Zubac is going to show the heck up, at the end of the day. Right. Like I said, man, there are large stretches where he is this team's best defender. Like I said, doesn't guard well in space, but he is a really, really good helper. If you ever if they were to use Kawhi in some really creative ways, to where Zubac, and this is probably more playoff talk here, but if the Clippers wanted to switch a ton, right, and you put Zubac on, like a non-floor spacer, right, let him kind of roam or whatever, you put Kawhi in the big, and you switch a lot, you switch 1 through 4, and you let Zubac play at the rim. Oh my goodness. Like the stuff this team can do defensively, because Zubac is a great rim protector surrounded by potential guys that can really, really guard their asses off on the perimeter. It's really, really fun. And then, like I mentioned, he is a really, really good post defender. So I think we got to give him some more credit defensively. And then even offensively, really freaking good offensive rebounder. He had a great series against the Dallas Mavericks. Great screen setter. I'm really, really excited to see kind of the 2-man game from Harden and Zubac this season. And as a matter of fact, if anybody on this roster is going to benefit from Harden, setting the table for them or setting the table for the team a lot more this season, it's going to be Ivica Zubac. just say hi for me to Clint Capella. Um, and all the money Harden and Trae Young, kind of gone that man. And I think Zubac is a more skilled offensive player than, almost any other big that Harden's played for in his prime. Like, I mean, you had the White, but, outside of the White Howard, it was a lot of Clint Capella. And I think Ivica Zubac is more talented as an offensive player. I think he's a guy that you can actually be legitimate post touches to. And that's something that I think this team is going to tap into a little bit more of this season and see not only how Zubac kind of reacts, but how the rest of the league reacts. Didn't get a lot of touches. This is regular season and playoff data. Didn't get a lot of touches, but regular season and playoffs, like he ranks 15th in the entire league in terms of post up points per possession. And if you filter this out and you make like the amount of possessions, like 50 scoring possessions, then Zubac is fourth, actually. The only players, let's make this a little bit more specific. For any player to have at least have 50 scoring possessions, and one more time, let's change the criteria one more time. I apologize. For any player to have at least 1.5 post-up opportunities per game, Ivica Zubac last season, the only players to average 1.5 post-up scoring possessions per game that are more efficient than Ivica Zubac were Kristaps Porzingis and Pascal Siakam. Like, he does not get the credit he deserves for how good of a post-up scorer he is. And again, he doesn't get and again, he doesn't quite get the amount of touches that a Jokic and Embiid gets, and that's why their numbers are a little bit lower because their volume's higher. But legitimately, the touch, the footwork, like Zubac is a guy that I think this season the Clippers are going to have to feed a little bit more to help get them through the regular season. Again, kind of like I was talking about. So look out for Zubac this season. Then Derrick Jones Jr., Terrence Mann, good role players here. The shot has kind of been the question mark for both of those guys. They both, at least for Terrence Mann. Terrence Mann's coming off a really good playoff run shooting the ball. Shot the heck out of the ball in that playoff series. And you're really, really hoping that with Terrence Mann, he can finally put it all together. No Paul George here. There are going to be games where this team is just going to flat out need him to produce. Like, shot 45.5% from three in the playoffs. But last season, shot 34.8% from three. But the season before that, shot 38.9%. So I'm curious to see if this team ask him to increase the volume. He's playing in a contract year, so obviously incredibly motivated. And then Derrick Jones Jr., I mean, well-deserved contract. I'm actually really, really happy he got that contract. Like we talked about, threes for $30 million. Really, really good wing stopper that also last season had one of his better shooting seasons. But at times, he can still get played off the floor. Like, you look at the final series against Boston. Boston kind of played him off the floor. But if the shot's falling, like, he's a guy that is going to contribute, that's going to play a ton. And he's a guy that can attack closeouts, finish well above the rim. Some of the stuff that him and Harden can do as well this season is going to be fun. And then, like I mentioned, a really, really good wing stopping defensive player that can guard the opposing team's best wing or best bigger guard and really make it tough for them. So I'm really, really excited to watch Derrick Jones Jr. in this system. And then a lot of these other guys, like, they have depth that we're pretty familiar with at this point. Norman Powell is at this point just a really, really good bench scorer. I think that's all this team really needs him to be. Chris Dunn, really, really, really good defender. The offense has, continued to, evolve, and you're happy to see Chris Dunn kind of make a career for himself. And then Nick Batum leaves the Clippers, that comes back to the Clippers. A guy that can knock down the three ball, stretch the floor, provide some help on the defensive end of the floor. But this is a pretty fun team. And then once again, I got to shout out my guy Cam Christie. Really deadly 3-point shooter that is always gunning for opportunities to transition and able to consistently pull on catch and shoot opportunities, who shot right around 40% on catch shoot threes last season at Minnesota. has some real self-creation upside as a secondary offensive option, in my opinion. And he's more than comfortable operating as a pick and roll or dribble handoff scorer and initiator, and can hit a variety of really just tough shots. He is a tough shot maker. I think he has good positional size, and he's an okay playmaker, especially if the defense overcommits and kind of forces him to make the pass. But you know, kind of this is where the biggest difference is between him and his brother Max. He just isn't as sharp of a defensive prospect as his older brother Max was, in my opinion, coming out of Michigan State. I think Cam's defensive technique in general is just a touch behind where Max's was at this point, and Max is kind of just now getting his defensive technique all the way like together, I think, projecting into next season. So Cam, I think it shouldn't play this year, but he's gonna be a fun guy to kind of watch, you know, for the G League for the Clippers, and see, like, kind of watch the progression and development of Cam Christie. Because again, I think in 2 years he's a guy that can really play for this Clippers team and be a rotation player, especially the defensive side of the floor can shape up here. But wrapping up here, because like I said, we do have a great interview with my guy Jamal Christopher. Going to the strengths and weaknesses of this team, the Kawhi Leonard Tyronn Lue combination is a massive reason why this team is where they are for me in this power rankings. They get a nice superstar multiplier boost from those two players. The defensive talent, I think, is a great strength of this team as well. Kawhi Leonard, Terrence Mann is a pretty solid defender. Derrick Jones Jr., Visa Zubac is an underrated defender. And then you also throw in the fact that, like I said, Kawhi, Chris Dunn, like they have a lot of guys here that can really defend. And I think shooting is still probably a strength. It's for sure in the regular season. Like Harden, Terrence Mann gets back around to that 38% mark. Norman Powell's a lights out shooter. Derrick Jones is a capable one. Batum, like I think shooting is a pretty solid strength of this team. And they've always been a good shooting team, you know, basically since Kawhi's gone here. If you look at the past 3 seasons, you know, sorry, dating back here, we date this, you know, bring this thing all the way back to 2018, 2019. That'd be the 2017, 2018. That would be the last season the Clippers were not top 10 in 3-point percentage per clean the glass. Fourth last season, fourth year before, second year before that, first year before that, 2020, 21, eighth at Kawhi's first year here, second year before that. So they have consistently been really good shooting team. And even though they do lose Paul George to Kawhi, Norman Powell, James Harden, Terrence Mann, I think they have enough shooting here for that to still be a strength. Weaknesses, it has to be the health of their star players. Like if Kawhi Leonard doesn't play 60 games, there's no shot this team makes the play in. Even to play in, unless Harden is just an all-star again. I think shot creation is actually a weakness too, for a very similar reason. Like if Kawhi Leonard goes down, that is where you're really going to miss Paul George, because now you don't have a guy that can legitimately create their own shot. And then I'm really just switching everything if that's the case that I'm facing this Clippers team. Because then what, your next best score is Norman Powell? Like, are we serious? So yeah, the shot creation is a big concern. And then again, the big depth. I hate their big depth here. And granted, I think a lot of teams could use a backup big right now, but you replace Mason Plumlee with Mo Bamba and Kai Jones, who I just have no faith in as players right now at this stage of their career. Now, moving to the Vegas over-under odds, and there's a couple of odds that I do really like. NBA Finals odds are, again, right. I mean, my NBA Finals pick, I'm not going to spoil it. We're not going to get some for a while, though. Clippers plus 8,000 pick to come out to win the NBA Finals. To come out of the Western Conference plus 4,000. Again, both bets that, you know, you're kind of wasting your money there, in my opinion. But these next two are really interesting. The Clippers make the playoffs is a plus 184. But this is the money one, I think. The Clippers over underline is set at 39.5, which I think is actually disrespectful. Because again, I think if Kawhi Leonard plays 30 plus games, with Kawhi and Ty Lue, not 30 plus games, 60 plus games, 30 plus. If I pretty sure I just said that would be an incredibly low bar to clear. But 39.5 wins for a Clippers team led by Kawhi Leonard and Tyronn Lue, Kawhi healthy again, permitting, it's freaking insane in my opinion. So I'm hammering the over. I think Kawhi has shown us when he's played in the regular season, he's for sure getting you 50 games. Like the 3 seasons he played for the Clippers before that, he was at 57, 52, 52. Last season, he played 68 games. So let's say he's at 60. There's no way this team is not a 40 win team. And which again is kind of just avoiding the fluke injury. And I don't know how, for example, a team like the Houston Rockets has a higher over under win projection than the Clippers, which again I think is just disrespectful as long as Kawhi is healthy. So I'm going to actually put that down so you can mark me down for the Hawks and for the Clippers over under projections. It's two of my favorite bets of the season. And eventually I'm going to make a big parlay and include some of these on here. But that's going to do it for us here today. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Don't go anywhere. I have a great interview with my guy, Jamal Christopher. You don't want to miss it. Till next time, though, hit that like button and subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one. Let's get to this interview with my guy, Jamal Christopher. Enjoy. All right, what's going on, everybody? I want to welcome you all in here to our post breakdown episode of the Los Angeles Clippers. And I had to get my guy, Jamal Christopher. I'll make sure I link all of his stuff in the description down below and to break down this Clippers team with me even deeper. Jamal, my guy, thank you so much for hopping in here. Really excited to do this with you.
Bro, thank you for having me on, man. I was just saying to you like a few minutes ago that I almost missed my chance when you reached out, bro. But no, I'm excited, man. The off season can be super long, so as we get closer to the season, I get more and more excited. So we get to talk hoops, get to talk Clipper hoops. So I'm always excited. Let's get it.
Yeah, man. You guys got the Intuit Dome now, so which I think is actually like really, really cool for LA in general. And yeah, it looks dope on the inside too. Actually, got to see some videos or whatever. Do you have any like overarching thoughts on that?
I don't want to like gas it because like I'm a Clipper fan, obviously, but like it's really hard to put in words. Like I got a chance to, I think it was like August 5th. It was like the week before the grand opening. The first thing they did was the Bruno Mars concert. I got a chance to visit it, and and I've been going to basketball arenas and basketball games since I was a kid, since I played growing up in LA. I have never been to an arena like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, Ballmer is like the top 5, top 8 richest man in the world. And that man built an arena. If you think about it, it came out exactly like that. It looked like he put a lot into it, man. The one thing that stuck out to me is like when you walk in, it's like this basketball paradise. Like the moment you walk in, like it's an arena for like, concerts and stuff, but like it was built for Clipper basketball. Like you walk in, before you even get into the arena, there's an outside court that you can play on, and then like there's a jumbotron right there where you could actually like watch the game while you're outside playing. You get inside as you're walking in, you look down, you can see the Clippers practice facility right there. I think without going too far into it, like the biggest thing, bro, is like when you sit. Obviously, the thing that's talked about the most is the halo, which is crazy because like every basketball arena I've been to has like the little jumbotron in the middle, and to have that removed, bro, it's crazy. But I think the biggest thing for me is like I've been going to crypto since it opened. I've been going to Clipper games, LA Sparks games, and I even seen the Ops play. I've seen the Lakers play a ton of times. And,
do I need to put the jersey on right there? I don't know if you can see it. It's the Anthony Davis Black Mama. Do I need to put that on?
Yeah. No. We don't need to do that. I see it right where it needs to be. You know what I'm saying? But no, I say that to say, man, when you go to crypto arena so often, and then you have a chance to visit like other arenas, you can kind of see the biggest difference, right? Which is, man, even if you go to like a Long Beach State game, right, in college, the crowd feels so on top of you, and it feels like a legitimate home court advantage. And I always felt like the Clippers and the Lakers, to a lesser extent, just didn't really have that as much until like a big game or in the playoffs. Like I've been to Lakers playoff game, I've been to Clippers playoff game. It gets rocking. It gets rocking. But on a night to night basis, you can kind of feel the distance. And then when you get into it, you have a seat, and almost every seat in the arena is set up to where you feel on top of it. You don't feel too far away from the players. And yeah, it's really set up to be a true home court advantage. I'd be shocked if the Clippers don't like have a resounding like sentiment of like a true home court advantage, something that they haven't had in their history by the end of the season. It's a fantastic arena. I encourage everybody, especially if you're an LA basketball fan, at least go to it at least once. It's an incredible piece of art for sure.
Can you imagine like the Lob City Clippers getting able to play in their own like distinct area? Like you said, like you are going to be kind of on top of it too, like so you're going to get a real home court feel. Because I think that is, even as a Laker fan, like I'll never forget Game 6 of the Warriors series last year, where it wasn't until Reeves hit the half court shot where the crowd finally came alive. Because I'm thinking like, dog, this is the deadest it's ever been for a elimination home game, which is crazy. But now you kind of get like kind of a special feel for, like you said, with the Intuit Dome, and hopefully get some nice Clipper basketball this year.
That's the plan. Hope so. But yeah, man, especially because like in the playoffs, they have like double headers. So like it'll be before that game, it may have been like OKC or something, and then you listen to OKC on TV, and you're like, okay, like it's different. It's different.
Or
right?
Indiana and the Knicks, and then like the next game is like, like come on now.
You know what I mean? So I'm excited for it, and hopefully we get a chance to experience some like playoff basketball in that arena this year. Hopefully, because I'm pretty sure if we do, man, it'll be something like you've never witnessed a basketball game in that type of environment. So hopefully we can experience some playoff basketball in there this year.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find my way out there this year. But Jamal, excuse me, the Clippers for me are 17th in my power ranking series. What is your gut reaction when you hear me say Clippers 17th in my power ranking series?
In the league or in the West?
In the league. There's not 17. In the league.
I was like, oh wait, no, there's not even 17. Yeah. I mean, it's tough to like truly comment on it without seeing like the teams above them, but I mean, that feels about right on paper. Losing Paul George without replacing him. I am someone who watched the Clippers every single game. I've watched every single game Paul George plays in, and I don't think the national media does. So I think the Clippers are, if they can stay away from the injury bug with Kawhi, he's coming off a season where he almost played 70 games last year. I think the player participation policy is 65 games. So if he stays away from like the freak injuries and stuff, even if they scale it back and go back to like low managing him, if you stay away from the freak injuries with Kawhi and you get a relatively season from everyone else, I think they should be better than what most people anticipate. But I mean, they're to me, they're in the 6 to 10 range out west.
Okay.
So 17th doesn't feel too far off, at least on paper. Not to me.
So here, I'll try to help it out by this. The teams I have below the Clippers, I have the Jazz below them, obviously. I have the Blazers below them. I have San Antonio below them, and I have the Rockets, and I have the Kings below them.
The Kings, it's interesting.
Yeah. And then some of those other teams are in that same tier. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some pretty optimistic takes about the Kings, and yeah, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I do think I've grown to appreciate DeMar the later he gets into his career in terms of what he brings, particularly in the regular season. but he can be a bit overrated by some in terms of his
Mm-hmm.
value to winning. Um, in 2024, a wing who just demands the ball and just doesn't take threes, doesn't really play make.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like a lot of the pieces the Kings have. It wouldn't shock
Just
me
a
if they're
weird
like
mesh.
playing again, but I don't see them being like I've seen people call them like a trendy pick, like to like win a round or something. And I just don't see that in the cards for them at all. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting one that you went with the Clippers over the Kings. I'm in agreement though for sure.
Yeah. Um, One of the reasons why, obviously, I have them above the Kings is Kawhi Leonard, who I put a tweet out earlier today. I'm curious to hear your take because some of the response I got was, how did he have an underrated season when he was All NBA second team? It's underrated from the sense of like, we don't talk about it because he didn't play really in the playoffs. Where
Yeah,
if you look back at last year's season, like Kawhi Leonard put another tweet out that was not related, but look at like data in the film or whatever. Kawhi Leonard was the best isolation scorer in the league last season. Had insane volume, was insanely efficient.
yeah.
What's like the outlook on him heading into next season? Do you agree with my take that like he had a kind of under the radar 2023 season despite being All NBA second team?
Yeah, I'm in 1,000% agree with you. If you go on my Twitter, I spend a lot of it like this week actually, ironically, talking about Kawhi Leonard's season. I think it's his other than the first year that he was with the Clippers, this
Mm-hmm.
is to me the best. That last year was the best Clipper year that he's had since he's been here. He scored the second most points in his career for a season last year. This is a guy that was dominant in isolation. He played games. Um, he didn't make an all defensive team, but he kind of had a return to what we know from Kawhi Leonard defensively. And he also had a stretch. The Clippers had a stretch where they were like 25-5. And
Mm-hmm.
during that stretch, Kawhi Leonard, I think he averaged like 26 a game on like 55, 55, 90. Just ridiculous stuff. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
like just, I mean, Woj had to tweet about it. Like, it's a ridiculous peak that he had last year. Of course, depending on who you ask, it doesn't matter because he wasn't available in the playoffs, and that's fair. But so going into this season, he's obviously the biggest reason why, if you're an optimist for the LA Clippers, it's him because when he's on the floor last year, he has like a Jokic effect on winning. Just an incredibly efficient player. And the one thing I like to point to is he every year since his first year with the Clippers, he's kind of been sharing the load in terms of shot attempts. And now without Paul George, I think you're going to see a return to Kawhi getting up closer to the 19.9 shots a game that he got his first year with the Clippers. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a guy who I wish I was exaggerating. When he touches the ball in half court, there's a good chance he's going to make it. That's his biggest
Mm-hmm.
strength. There's no shot that he can't make. He's physically strong enough to get to any place on the floor, primarily the mid range, which he's one of the greatest ever at that
Mm-hmm.
shot. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm in agreement, and I think we don't talk about it enough because of the playoffs. And yeah, he's coming off of one of the best seasons of his career, and I don't think it's talked about like that. But it's literally one of the best seasons he's ever had. And yeah, if he plays 65 plus games again, that changes a lot in the Western Conference for sure.
So with Kawhi, and again, a lot of the narrative around Kawhi is again, it's just the health.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of weird to say like the Clippers are ironically in a very much like Lakers position where it's
I've been
just
saying
get
that,
this
bro. Yeah,
man
yeah.
to the playoffs, and there's maybe there's less than 5 players in the league that I would rather have in a playoff series more than Kawhi. Um, and again, like I said, like the injury stuff is definitely credited and it makes sense for sure. But man, just get this dude hell. Even if he doesn't play 65 games, play a healthy 60. We'll figure it out the other 22. Get him to the play-in even at least.
Yeah, man. No, 100%, man. Like I think I mentioned the 65 game policy because I truly do think that matters to these guys. You mentioned the Lakers, and it's like the last like 3 or 4 years, LeBron and AD were struggling to stay on the floor, and then last year both of them played like 70 plus. Kawhi Leonard was struggling to stay on the floor, and he played almost 70 games, and AD did the same thing, and Steph did the same thing. So I think it matters for sure, and I think this year, when it comes to Kawhi Leonard's injury thing, a lot of people, and I granted, I watched the Clippers, so I look at it from a different view. Kawhi, and it's going to sound crazy, his injuries aren't what people think. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't just miss games. Like when he's available, he plays. It's the getting to April and May healthy. But staying away from freak injuries is a challenge. But like you said, 60 games. If he plays 60 games, I think the Clippers are a top 6 seed. That's my like hot take. And if he does that, all bets are off because I've been saying it for a while. This is the most talented Western Conference you've ever seen. Mm-hmm. The top of the West includes like the Dallas Mavericks and the Thunder. Mm-hmm. But like you get in the playoff series and you get a healthy Kawhi Leonard or James Harden, or like you said, and I've been saying it all summer, a healthy LeBron James and Anthony Davis. They lost in 5 to the Nuggets last year, but like that could have went either way, bro. And I say this about the Clippers, they lost in 6 to the Western Conference champions without Kawhi Leonard. Yeah. Like that's how bunched up the West is. And you get healthy LeBron and AD or healthy Kawhi in the playoffs. You know, they're the guys of yesteryear at this point. But you get them in the playoffs, and I think all bets are off. And I just think that, you know, when it comes to those LA teams, people have gone a little bit too far left with them. Not as much with the Lakers. I think the narrative is a bit softer with them, just because we've actually seen LeBron and Anthony Davis in the playoffs at least. And you can't say the same for Kawhi. But there's a level that guys like Kawhi Leonard, LeBron, Jokic, there's a level that those type of guys get to in the playoffs where, especially in this era, man, I want to throw KD in there as well, where they can be 6. They can be
step
6,
even maybe.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter, right? Like, I've been saying it, like the 5th seed made the finals last year. The year before that, the 7th seed, the Lakers came from the play-in to the conference finals. In recent years, the Clippers were a 4th seed, and they made the conference finals. There's just
with no Kawhi Leonard, mind you.
Yeah, like there's just so much flux in the West at this point that if you got one of those guys, you just hope that they're healthy at the right time, and you really can make some magic happen for sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong. The only time Kawhi has had a fully healthy playoff run would have been the bubble, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
We had 8 months. What is it? We had a time period between the end of the season and then COVID happened, and he had a break to get through that one. So
and to your point about that Mavs series, like if I recall correctly, I think my pick was Clippers in 7, but that was or maybe it was Mavs in 7, but because Kawhi was on the other side, I was like, oh man, I don't feel great about this one.
Yeah, I you know, it's crazy. My brother is a big Clipper guy, and he had like Mavs in 7, I think. I was so confident though that the Clippers. I had Clippers in 6. I was very confident that the Clippers were going to beat the Mavs. Very confident, because, bro, we peaked so high last year. It looked like we went into Boston on the second night of a back-to-back and smacked them by like 35. It was like I was like, oh, this is it. This is what the championship team looks like. This is what they feel like. We've witnessed Luka going crazy against us before, and it's like
plenty times.
Like let him score 70. We'll be all right if we hold up on our if we hold up our end on the other side, you know, they kept saying like they have Kyrie now, and it's like, bro, I know how playoff Kyrie is post LeBron. Like it's really a bunch of talk. Like he really isn't like that. That's another story. I was ready, man. I was really confident in that, but I'm a big like Luka is.
insane.
I don't. He is on a trajectory, man. That all time guy. Like he's terrific. So he's in that group as well. Where just get him in the playoffs and he can really take you there. So. But yeah, I thought we were gonna do it, and I think I was kind of proven right, man. We took them to 6 without Kawhi Leonard, essentially. And yeah, if he plays, I do think the outcome is different. But like, if what is it? If we're a fifth, we'd all be drunk. It's tough to kind of keep saying that. I always say like with the Clippers now, as long as Kawhi is on the team, I don't think we've ever had a player that's played in a Clipper jersey that's better than Kawhi Leonard. But as long as he's here, I gotta see it to believe it. I don't really talk about championship aspirations with him on the team just because like I gotta see him play in April and May at this point. Because if anybody tells me that like, oh, I can't believe in the Clippers because he's on the team and he's inevitably gonna get hurt, bro, at this point I'm like, you're right. I have no rebuttal for it.
Can't say anything.
No rebuttal for it. So.
Yeah.
We'll see.
That's like a somebody saying, yeah, you know, I can't believe in the Lakers because D'Lo's going to disappear come April. And like, yeah. Now that's probably like not enough of a reason to not believe in the Lakers, but like I can't say anything at that point. Yeah. 100%. So we got to talk about the elephant in the room, if you will. And that is Paul George, who leaves to go to Philly. I think just for fun, I think I ran like my formula or whatever. If Paul George was on this team, putting him in this team, maybe take off like, let's just say Derrick Jones Jr. or whatever, right? And also I think that was the Celsius. So shout out to the unofficial sponsor. They are not sponsored, but like, you gotta have it. Which flavor is that? Orange? Just had one of those yesterday. Orange. The raspberry peach one. I don't know if you can see it. It's one of the newer ones.
I got that in the fridge. Yep.
Oh, there we go. What was kind of your reaction to how the whole Paul George situation unfolded? He felt slighted one way or another about those situation. And do you think the Clippers did enough to kind of help? You're not going to replace. There's not going to be a 1-for-1 replacement for Paul George, but by kind of trying to add around the margins a bit by getting a guy like a Derrick Jones, do you think they did enough? So kind of a 2-part question there.
So, it's long-winded. So when it comes to Paul George, the extension talks start after, if I'm not mistaken, the 22-23 season. I forget what the offer was, but Paul George, I felt disrespected. I think it was like they extended two for $30 million. I don't know, but point is, it was a low ball. They felt like I agree, but like I get it because Paul George was coming off a year in which he wasn't all NBA. He wasn't healthy again, and he was asking for the max. And I think at that point, Lawrence Frank even kind of came out and said it. He was like, after we lost to the Suns in the playoffs, I think. Yeah, we lost to the Suns in the playoffs in which both Kawhi and Paul George didn't play. And we kind of came to the conclusion that as presently constructed, we aren't good enough / we aren't healthy enough. So that's why you enter in the James Harden play comes in, and it's like one more gas at it. And you kind of saw, if we're healthy, you can make a run at this. Ultimately, Kawhi gets hurt again. Paul George does the Paul George thing in the playoffs where, hey, you're asking for the max. No Kawhi Leonard. That's fair, but like last season, you're the 6th highest paid player in the league. This is your chance. You want a max. Let's see what you got. He's playing the Dallas Mavericks. He averages like 18 a game and like 30%. Just terrible. Absolutely terrible. And then Yeah, that's how the season ends, and then he's asking for a max. Um, I think for me personally, I knew for a while he was leaving. And the reason for that is just like, bro, I kind of figured the Clippers weren't going to give full maxes to Kawhi and Paul. That just wasn't going to happen. They haven't shown themselves to be healthy enough to deserve that. And on top of that, I think the Clippers have, my personal opinion, they are still fighting to compete to see if we can get in the playoffs and make some magic. But they also have one foot towards the end of this era, and they want to be players for when the next big name becomes available. And so you really don't want to handicap your team like that. And so I didn't believe that they were going to full max any of those guys. And I said, there is a full max out there for Paul George. There is one. And it's as simple as 34-year-old superstar. Paul George has never left money. He's never been the guy to leave money on the table. And yeah, if there's a full max out there, he's gonna take it. He's out. So that was my belief. And then you hear the Philly stuff during the season, and I was like, I think this is real. I think this is real. I would have loved to have him back, but at the end of the day, I kind of felt like the end was near because the money talks. So yeah, I would have loved to have him back because I think last year we lost like what 3 of our first 4 or 5 games. Then we got Harden, immediately went on a 6-game losing streak trying to integrate him. And then we still ended up winning like 51, 52 games because after that like 6-game losing streak, we take off and win like 27 out of 32 or something like that and look like the best team in the league. So I really would have loved to see that core with a training camp together. But nonetheless, he's gone. And while I don't think the Clippers on paper are better without him, I do think people are kind of overestimating what Paul George brought on a night-to-night basis. Especially the advanced metrics will always grade out really nicely for Paul George because he really is a fantastic player. Like, he walks into like 23 a game, 40% from 3, 6'9". He'll always be a competent defender. And in spots, not as much as he used to, but in spots, you can throw him the ball and he could create a shot for himself or for teammates. He really is a fantastic talent. But when you watch him over the course of 82 games, he will give you games where it's like, why do you have 5 points? Why did you take 8 shots tonight? Like it happens far. I wish I was making it
for
up.
For a superstar player, it does happen too often.
It happens too often, and like every year, like even last year, he had like a month where you wondered if Norman Powell was a better player than him. I wish I was making it up. Like he went through stretches where you're just like, bro, you're Paul George, right? So I think the loss looks a bit more than it actually could be. I think Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, they graded out as like, I think I saw the stat earlier on Twitter, like they graded out as 2 of the best isolation players, if not the 2 best in the league last year.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard is just a far more superior basketball player than Paul George. And so instead of divvying up shots with Kawhi and P, you have Kawhi Leonard taking more shots. You have Harden with the ball in his hands more. And these are 2 guys who play a hyper efficient brand of regular season basketball. Like they are regular season floor raisers where if the ball is in their hands, you're gonna get a good shot every time. They just generate good shots. And in Kawhi Leonard's space, he just makes shots. Like he's one of the best contested shot makers you'll ever see in the NBA history. So Zubac averaged like 16 and 11 last year in the playoffs. He's gonna get more touches. As one of the more underrated 5s in the league. Terrence Mann had a really good playoff on both ends. He's going to be playing for a new deal, kind of. So I think there's reason for optimism in how they've replaced Paul George, but it's like a collective thing. It's not going to be, they didn't get anybody. Well, they couldn't get anybody. to replace him directly. But as a unit, I do think there's a way where the Clippers can be like a top 10 offense. I think Harden, since he's left OKC, he's never had lower than like a top 12 offense. I think that's something like that. And as long as he and Kawhi are healthy, they'll be a really good offense. And then this year, the defensive talent is just different, right? They've added Chris Dunn. They've added Derrick Jones Jr. Zubac is one of the more underrated fives at protecting the rim. Kawhi Leonard is always a plus defender. Like the defensive talent, there's Jeff Van Gundy on the sidelines as well now. Like the defensive talent on the Clippers should be able to hold them over on nights that they struggle on offense, particularly without P. So, it's tough losing Paul George, but like I've been telling people all summer, like if Paul George returned, like you guys weren't picking the Clippers to win the championship anyway with him. It's tough losing them, but I think they did the best that they could in replacing that kind of talent.
Yeah, the Clippers defense, I have right like around top 12, 13 range. I think it's gonna be a really good defense this year. Zubac, kind of like you were saying, is an underrated five as a defender, maybe just a five in general, right? Because I think we do kind of nitpick with Zubac a bit because I think if you can get him in space, sure, but he's a drop big at the end of the day. They're like, it's a good rim protector, really good post defender. So I think Zubac, like you mentioned, or like kind of we just discussed there, Kawhi had his best defensive season. If you look at like dunks and threes, actually, Kawhi Leonard last season had his best defensive season since, I mean, you can't even count that season. Since his defensive, he won a D point in 2016, I think, right? Or was that Draymond's? Anyway, best since 2016.
I think it was 2016.
Yeah, that's his best defensive plus minus since, or estimated defense plus minus or whatever, since his defensive player of the year, essentially.
Yeah, he was. It goes back to what we were saying earlier. That was just a fantastic. I mean, he was so good last year. Kawhi Leonard. He was so good last year, and the defense was a welcome thing to see because Kawhi kind of walks into being a competent defender because he's high IQ. He's a terrific athlete. He's strong, and he's a veteran at this point. So you can't really run sets that he doesn't know. So he just walks into being a good defender. But when he's engaged and he's intent on that end to be a good defender, he's going to be one of the best at his position in that regard. But like you said it with Zoo. Gobert won another decoy last year, and they kill him because he gets fried by Luka Doncic, and it's Luka Doncic, bro. That's
the best offensive player in the league.
You know what I mean? It's tough. So I often said that, with Zoo, that isn't going to be the thing. The thing is with Zubac, it's going to be he's going to get an increased role this year. What happens is in the playoffs, he averaged 16 and 11. I think last year he averaged career highs across the board. Now it's going to be a thing where the Clippers are going to feature him, right? And when you feature someone, he's going to get doubled a bit more. How does he pass out of doubles? Can he be a 30-minute a game player while being a plus defender and not fouling? These are things that you kind of can't account for, so you just got to see. The Clippers defensively, I'm pretty excited about. I think it'll be a struggle at times offensively if Kawhi Leonard and Harden, especially if Harden isn't making step backs and the contested twos from Kawhi aren't going that night. It could be a struggle, but the defense should be there every night, and as long as they're healthy, they'll have a chance to win most games or be in most games.
All right, and then last for now at least, individual player discussion. It's got to be the 35-year-old, freshly 35-year-old, just turned 35 a couple weeks ago, and it's James Harden, who,
Uno.
Yeah. So let's just start. What are your kind of your expectations for Harden next season? I do agree with like the conversation from earlier for sure, where we're just talking regular season floor raisers. There's very few guys over the past decade and a half or so better than James Harden, just raising your regular season floor. But yeah, let's just start the conversation there. What are your James Harden heading into 2024?
Yeah, I said it when we were talking about it last summer when we were talking about if we were going to get him, and I was just like, man, the Clippers need real regular season help because
Yeah.
I think Kawhi Leonard when he's healthy, he's fantastic. Paul George when he's on the floor is a bit more name than game, but he looks fantastic. But like neither of those guys are like Jokic or Luka in that regard, where Luka's gonna average 34 a game, right? Jokic is gonna play 82 games and get you 25 to 30 a night. I think
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard averaged, if we rounded up last year, he averaged 24 a game, right? So like Kawhi and Paul George um, hadn't really shown themselves in their Clipper tenure to be not just healthy, but they weren't high engine scoring guys.
In the
And
regular
so
season,
you needed
especially.
someone, yeah, so you needed someone to kind of raise that regular season floor because it's just too tough to win in the West like that. And so I was like, man, you bring Harden, we're going to have a stretch where we look like the best team in the league. That's just what he does. This is a guy that is one of the more underrated ball handlers and passers to me in NBA history. He has this thing where he comes off a pick and your defense is already on fire because you either have to show or you're in drop or you're like up to the level and like there's nothing he can't do. Like he's taking off the dribble threes. You put two on him on the ball, he can make the play. Like he's a willing passer. Like he just plays smart regular season basketball.
Do you really think he's an
Um,
underrated passer? I just like
I
process
do.
that. You think he's an underrated passer?
I do. I don't think people talk enough about his playmaking in a historical context. Not to me. I don't see it.
Huh.
Um,
Okay. By the way, I
but
do think he's an all-time great passer, but I at least on my timeline, at least I feel like he gets the credit he deserves. But that's interesting. My bad to cut you off.
yeah, maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me. But yeah, before we got him, my whole beef with Harden is like I just didn't like the way he went out in the playoffs sometimes. Like I just think
Yeah.
he went off like a sucker. You know what I mean? Like he'll shoot 5 times in an
Yeah.
elimination game or something, and it's like, come on, bro, like that's terrible. So, but I never questioned his regular season floor raising. Now last year it looked like, and this is to me, this is what it looked like to me. Him along with the others, but primarily him. It was like do or die when they made that trade. Like, okay, this has to work, and they went like to the floor, like just pushed the pedal to the metal.
Yep.
Where by like the All-Star break, they looked like the best team in the league, and then I think over like the last 30 games, Harden looked terrible. He looked gas, like he looked awful. And then he got like a little 2 week break before the playoffs, and then the playoffs came around, and he looked great. He looked great, particularly through the first 4 games. He looked like the best player in the series. I think he was like at 26 and like 9 or like 50 or 40. Like it was the first 4 games. It was 2-2 without Kawhi, and Harden looked like the best player in the series. So I say that to say, going into this season, I don't really have much doubts about Harden per se as the player. I think unless he completely falls off the cliff, you kind of know what you're going to get with him, particularly with the higher usage. Uh, at least to start the year, he should be really good. I think
Mm-hmm.
at his age, he doesn't touch the paint as much as he used to. He doesn't touch the rim as much as he used
Yep.
to. And
You combine that
I
with the
think,
hamstring injury too, or hamstring
yeah,
injuries at this point.
yeah, no, he hasn't been the same since. So I think, can he last? Like, can he return to like 20 and 10, but do so efficiently?
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of the Clippers. I don't think he'll be an All Star this year, But I think a lot of the Clipper hopes kind of hang on like, can Harden be a fringe all-star this year? Can he return to being in that conversation? I think if he does, the Clippers are probably a dark horse to like do some really big things if he is that guy. I think he can be, but I don't think it's a guarantee. He really ended last year badly. He really did. I think part of that is too because like you kind of have to force Harden to miss games. He likes to play every single game, and at a certain point, it just was doing more harm than good for him. But he loves to play. So yeah, I think he's gonna have the ball more in his hands. I think this is a guy that makes others better. He's gonna make Zoo better. I think even with his first year with Zoo, Zoo had career highs across the board, and then had his best playoff series as a pro. I think he's gonna make Terrence Mann better. I think he's gonna make Kawhi's job easier. I think there's a potential for that pairing, the Kawhi and Harden pairing, to be a bit more seamless than Kawhi and Paul George. Just because that's the point guard that Kawhi is looking for, right? Like that's that bit of a Kyle Lowry, Kawhi Leonard 2019 sort of deal where you don't have to make every play. So I still think even this version of James Harden is the best point guard that Kawhi Leonard has ever had. And yeah, respect to Tony Parker.
Yeah.
Respect to Tony Parker. But like, I
still
think
probably.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think, because I do think there's a 20 and 10 point guard still there with Harden. I think the last year in Philly, he was like 22 and 11, and I think you want him to return to some version of that. And yeah, I think that's in the cards for him. I think a lot of people don't agree with that. I think a lot of people kind of look at his line last year, what he was like 16 a game or something, and it's kind of like, what happens with players? Yeah, 16 and 9, I think. And I think a lot of people are like, he's 35, he's a point guard, like this is it, the burst is gone. But no, I think him and Kawhi are going to benefit from, like, you know, we need you to score more. And I think Harden at times was a bit too differential last year. So it'll be interesting to see what are the results when he has to look for his own offense a bit more. You've got to return to that. But no, I think last year you kind of saw what Harden brings to a team in the regular season. And I think as long as he remains healthy and Kawhi remains healthy, you're going to see more of that, which is why I think the Clippers have a chance to be a top 6 team still, even without Paul George. Top 6, avoiding the play.
So I think, because I was kind of like going through my thoughts in my head about Harden while I was like listening to you talk, and I think and you pointed this out, this team's playoff hopes are dead set on Kawhi's health, and can Harden be a little bit more than what he was last season, right? Like you said, fringe all-star. That's perfect. But then, like, as I'm listening, I'm like, I don't know. Do you want that more for the playoffs? But my answer is no, because again, it's one, just get there, and I trust Kawhi if he's healthy to do what he does. But then also, this really actually has nothing really to do with the previous playoff blunders. As a matter of fact, like you said, I remember watching Game 4 of that Mavs series and watching Harden essentially just take over with no Kawhi Leonard and saying, no, we are winning this damn game and going back 2-2. I don't know if James Harden is like your clear-cut 2 is good for playoff basketball, because I vividly remember it was a game we played you guys. I want to say we were healthy because I remember us having Vando, I think, if he ever played. It was around that time. Vando was either coming back or something like that. But I remember like looking at like Harden, and kind of you're talking about like, he's one of probably the 5 greatest pick and roll operators ever. Where, like you said, prime Harden, it did not matter. You play drop, you're getting killed. It's the floater, it's the lob threat with like Capella in Houston, or you couldn't switch back then either, because like he had the burst still to, I'm either gonna blow by you or I'm just going to fry whoever's switching on me in space. But now, like going maybe like kind of last year's matchup with like us and you guys, I was like, I'm not playing drop because you still respect the generational playmaking, in my opinion, at least, and the pull up 3 game. But I said no, you switch. And no, I remember now. This was the Braun go batshit crazy game in the fourth quarter. It was that game. It was the comeback game. Yeah. And I was like, let's switch. And freaking Darvin never switched for the first 3 quarters. I think Harden was like cooking us. And then the comeback happens. I think, no, this is when Braun says, fuck that, we are switching. And the power got cut off. And that's where when in the playoffs, for the most part, like, teams are more scheme versatile. And I think that does worry me a little bit more with the Harden discussion because he doesn't get to the rim as much, if damn near at all now, because like we talked about the lack of explosion.
Yeah, he had, if I'm not mistaken, career lows in terms of attempts at the rim last year. It's funny because it's ironic because him and CP play together, Chris Paul. But I liken this version to James Harden. I think he's declined into that Chris Paul type of player where, like, not this version of Chris Paul, but, like, I remember.
Like Suns version. Like Phoenix, or even OKC. Like
yeah. Phoenix or the OKC, the second word OKC, where he was still making all NBA teams and still one of the better players in the league. And I'm just watching teams just struggle with Chris Paul and pick and roll. And I'm like, dude, if you just switch that and dare this version of Chris Paul to be a one-on-one player, you can do it, I promise. But no one would ever do it. And the Suns ended up making the finals. And I think with Harden, yeah, that's the big worry. Like, if you make Harden this version of Harden, because at this point, as with most players as they age, it's a cerebral thing, right? Like, if you make Harden play one-on-one beat me basketball, it's probably going to end up in a step back, right? And he's still one of the better players in the league at making that shot, but that's still a tough diet to live off of. That worries me as well, but it doesn't worry me as much. Just
in the regular season. But go ahead.
I don't really. The Clippers have to get there, and that is still very much in question. I don't see the Clippers missing the playoffs as long as they get enough games from Harden and Kawhi Leonard. But it's not a shoo-in. The West is tough, and they're going to have to figure out some things offensively. And, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because, like, unless the matchup is perfect, like, I remember one of the teams that did do that was the Minnesota Timberwolves when we played them. And
that makes sense.
Had some dreadful games. Like, he had some dreadful games. He looked so old in those games. And it's like Paul George was another one where.
Do you want to hear the Harden's splits against the Timberwolves? Sorry to cut you off. Do you want to hear them?
Yeah, go ahead. I know it's ugly.
11.8 points. Only took 12 shot attempts per game. Shot 27%, 28%. We'll give him the bump in rounding up. 28% from the field, 24% from 3. Still got his assist numbers or whatever. Like, I'm never worried about that. But yeah, like, that was pretty bad.
No, they cut teams with athletes that can switch are like Harden's kryptonite at this point. But, like, we get into the playoffs versus the Mavericks, and it's like you're playing Luka and Kyrie 40 minutes a night. Oh, that's easy pickings. One of them, we're going to have whoever they're guarding, we're going to involve them in screen and roll. You're either going to switch it or put 2 on the ball. And now, instead of the Mavericks having a pretty easy time without Kawhi Leonard, now it's 2-2 with Game 5 in LA without Kawhi because you are playing 2 guys that really can't guard. So, as what happens, and you kind of alluded to this, Harden in his prime is much more scheme proof, as in, like, it doesn't matter the team you play. I can figure this out.
It's just, do I miss shots tonight? Right.
Right. This version of Harden is much more matchup dependent. There are certain teams where you can even almost before the game starts, it's like, okay, there's a real chance for him to have a really good game tonight. Versus, who's the first?
Is that Boston on the schedule?
Oh, man, the first time we played Boston, it was bad. Like, you just know what games he's going to struggle against. So,
yeah,
that's tough. And in those moments, I always say this though, when you have a guy like Kawhi Leonard, you have a guy like LeBron James, you have a guy like Jokic, and the list
Yeah.
goes on. You guys, those guys are paid to have bailout ability. Like, yes, Harden stinks against the Timberwolves. Yes, we don't have what we need. Like, yes, it's bad. But this is when you don a cape, and hey, you are the face of the franchise saver. So in those moments, we're gonna need Kawhi Leonard to be a little bit superhuman. And
Put on
even
the
in
cape one more time.
yeah, and even in like over the course of the season, if we're going to exceed expectations, we're gonna need Kawhi to play at an All NBA second team level, be in the conversation for first team.
And
We're
then
gonna need
play in the
Harden to be a
playoffs.
fringe all star. Yeah, exactly. And then the hope is out of like Zoo, Terrence, somebody takes a step. Somebody takes a step that you can't really account for. And then before you know it, pray for Kawhi Leonard to be healthy in April, and then you may have some action. But yeah, no, man. Certain matchups with Harden, it terrifies me for sure. It terrifies me for sure because it's almost like Harden. I talk about this all the time, bro. Basketball equity, right? So Harden still is living off basketball equity, meaning he is still a phenomenal isolation player. So you kind of don't want him in isolation with anybody. So the playbook defensively on him is you don't want to switch.
Right.
That's conventional wisdom even to this day. But like you really should, because if you switch on him, it kind of takes away what may be his best part of his game at this point, which is getting two on the ball, penetrating and dishing and creating for others. Now you're making him into a scorer, especially if you crowd him and force him to make a play at the rim. Your chances are much better. It's kind of like there's certain guys that have shooting, and like real equity in shooting, where no matter how much they miss, Klay Thompson sometimes even last
he could
year
go 0 for 15, and you're still guarding Klay Thompson the exact same way.
Right. So just him by being him like if he's on the floor, like it just makes things better because he's going to occupy a defender. So with Harden, it's his one-on-one ability where people, I mean, you see it's James Harden. He still looks like the guy in Houston. So it's like you don't want to leave him on the island with anyone, but like this version of Harden, you probably should. So yeah, certain matchups terrify me, man. I can't lie.
I didn't get to watch like any of the Clippers and Pistons games, but like look at the splits now. Did Asar just have him in hell that much? Because stats wise, he did not play well.
Asar, he's that's the twin, right? Yeah, he's a talented defender, but like even that, like you can kind of tell. I don't think it was so much of that. It was only 2 games. I think the other one, we played the Pistons in a matinee at Staples. We never play good in those. So the sample size is pretty short. But like if you think about it, like the Pistons stink, but like they have some athletes.
Yeah.
And you throw some athletes on Harden, it can get tricky if he's not making shots that night. So
yeah.
It checks out, I think.
And then one last point about like the making him a scorer, especially where I think they're gonna, at least in a regular season, rely on Harden to set the table for these guys, like a Terrence Mann, like a Zoo, like you were saying. Yeah, like no, just forget the equities build up. Make him a scorer. Harden, go get 40, like you said with Luka. Go get 40. We'll live with everybody else.
Yeah, because like I'm one of those. I don't really like double teaming, right? And it's one of those things where we beat Luka twice in the playoffs, and a big part of that was, we switch everything and we live with it because Luka isn't going to score 80 points. He's not going to score 90, right? Like if 30, 35 is not enough to win, right? So you get in trouble when, like I remember the last time we beat Luka in the playoffs in Game 2, Tim Hardaway Jr. almost had 30. Maxi Kleber had like a 10 or 12 point game. Like that's what beats you, right? So yeah, like because these guys are talented, right? So like Harden is gonna walk into he's gonna play enough and have the ball enough to where he's gonna have like 15 and 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
15-10. So if you don't make him a scorer, what ends up happening is he creates for others. Terrence Mann has 15, Lou has 18, Kawhi is going to get his 30. Now you're really kind of in trouble as opposed to
Right.
like, no. Make everybody play one-on-one basketball. Make them, and that's what made, this is kind of a tangent, but that's what made Prime Golden State with Kevin Durant so good, which is, Kevin Durant used to always allude to it, like, we make you guys play over the top basketball. We're going to switch everything. So all of your plays are going to get blown up. We just switch everything 1 through 5. And unless you have guys that can cook one-on-one, it could be a long night, which is why, like, the Rockets in 2018 kind of had some success against them, because that season, Chris Paul and James Harden put up some incredible isolation numbers.
Yep.
So, I think the Clippers didn't replace TG, so there's a lack of talent there. But there's a real lack of shot creation talent, and you want to amplify that even more by making James Harden revert back to his scoring, just to see if he can do it. It may be one of those nights where the step back is like he's just not missing, and if that's the case, then you tip your hat. But I think in terms of just Harden specifically, that's the recipe this year. Make him score. Make him be a one-on-one guy.
To your point about Luka, the series against you guys, that was the most shot attempts per game Luka had in the entire playoffs. Was against you guys. Game 1 took 26 shots. He got his 30, got 33, but you guys won by 12. So,
the big thing with that is like, one of the reasons, the second time we played them, we were down 2-0. And like I said, if you look at Tim Hardaway Jr. Numbers through those first 2 games, you look at Porzingis, I think in one of those games, he was pretty good as well. Maxey had a good. My point with that is there's a few things, right? You don't lose when Luka is getting into big head mode and he's going crazy, right? What you lose is through 2 things. One, you start panicking when he starts making contested step back jumpers. So now you're sending 2. Now you're trying to trap. And not only is he a phenomenal scorer, he's a phenomenal passer. Now you're all screwed up, right? So what ends up happening is your defense is on fire. So the first part of it is like we were just kind of over helping and like completely wetting the bed when Luka started going crazy. And then the other thing is when guys, I always say this, when guys like Luka, you can't really stop them. But what you need to do is make sure your offense is together on the other end. Because at the end of the day, bro, it's playoff basketball. Like Luka Doncic is on the other end. You got to have somebody that can get you 30 to 35, right? And so a big part of why we were able to come back from 0-2 was because Kawhi Leonard, he kind of left Earth that series. That's the last series that Kawhi.
Game 6 was insane of that series.
Oh man, that bro, you should have saw me. I left Earth because, like, I'm a Clipper fan. Like, those are moments that usually go bad for us, and it's like, man, I've never. No, they do. It's very rare.
Keep it in a buck, though.
No, for sure. 2015, we were down 3-2, going into San Antonio for Game 6.
Yeah.
And Chris Paul in the second half answered the call. Him and Blake, but for the most part, those moments, it's bad, and we don't have many guys in our history that can don a cape like that and say, I'm not losing the series.
Yeah.
And like that's my favorite trait of Kawhi. Like injuries, no injuries, down 0-2. I go back to that when they were down 0-2 to the Bucks in 2019, the Raptors.
Yeah.
They asked Kawhi, well, what's next? And he says, well, we're gonna go to Toronto and play Game 3. And everybody's laughing, but like I love that, bro, because it's like he never gets too high, he never gets too low, and that's what you want out of your franchise player. And he's shown that even in his Clipper tenure, he just hasn't been healthy enough. But Game 6, one of, if not the best playoff game he's ever played. It's up there. That's a storied playoff guy. Like I've never seen anything like that. Like when we didn't have Paul George and we're going up against KD and the Suns, he walked right up in there and just said, "Doesn't matter. Like I'm Kawhi," and then he beat KD. He outplayed KD through the first 2 games, and then got hurt again in 2023.
Yeah.
But
oh, by the way,
yeah,
38,
no.
5-5 in game 1, 31, 8-7 in game 2.
Like just ridiculous stuff. And like no Paul, this is no Paul George. Russell Westbrook was the point guard. You can look up the numbers where Russell Westbrook shot through the first 2 games. It was he really went up in there. I'm not gonna say by himself. It wasn't by himself, but like
Pretty
man,
close. Eric Gordon was the starting 2 guard in 2023. Like that's
it was dicey and a lot like Jokic, right? Like you don't need much. You don't need much. Just like don't like Kawhi always says this, right? He's big on this. This is why he's really big on point guard play. He always says like, don't turn the ball over. That's his thing. Do not turn the ball over. If you get Kawhi Leonard in his spots where he can touch the ball, 9 times out of 10, he's either going to make a tough shot or make a responsible play, draw 2, and play out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's always been one of my favorite players ever since like my high school days. Playing basketball in LA City. I just remember him at Riverside King, and I was going to watch him play. But watching him every night since he's been a Clipper is like, yeah, he's just terrific. Real grown man in the room type of basketball. And you kind of realize that not every player has that. Like Paul George sometimes, like he gets the ball and like throws the ball in the third row. Like, what are you looking at? Or just dribbles it off his foot. Or, why are you all of a sudden you can't generate shots for yourself? Like you just realize that not everybody is like that. So yeah, hopefully he's healthy this year, some playoff time. The game deserves it.
Yeah. All right, let's wind down here with some team awards here. So let's start things off for the Clippers. Team MVP. I feel like this is pretty easy.
Kawhi, yeah, for sure.
All right.
That's a franchise, man. Yeah, it's pretty simple, man. If he's healthy enough to play up to his ceiling or as close as he can to it, we'll be a really good team. If he's not on the floor enough, we'll be a really bad team.
Yeah,
MVP for sure.
Who's the breakout player of the year for the Clippers?
Zoo.
Okay.
And this is, I always say, and I'm pretty sure you can say this about the Lakers. There's just certain guys that if you don't watch that team every night, it's hard to really get a good grasp on them, other than like some generalities of it. Zoo is one of those guys where you really got to watch him every night. And if you do, you can see that a lot of Clippers Twitter will talk about it. Like, this is a guy that there's a 15 or 16 a game with 10 boards just right there. We talk about it all the time where, Kawhi Leonard, as great as he is, Harden, as great as he is, these are guys, for Harden's case, this is why Harden was so needed, right? Kawhi Leonard draws too, but he doesn't really play make a ton. He doesn't make plays for others. So a lot of his stuff is like contested to James Harden. If you switch and you get him in a one-on-one, it's a contested step back. Paul George kind of lives off that. And these are some of the best contested shot takers in the game. So it's not as so it's not as dire as you think. But like there are moments where our offense is like, man, this is hard. Zoo is just right there. Just give him the ball. He has one of the best touches in the league. I'm not even joking. If you look up the numbers, if he shoots it, it's probably going in. Every year he's taken a step as an offensive player. Like I said, last year with James, he averages a career high, and I think that is something to watch between Harden and Zoo, year 2 of Harden and Zoo. That is just waiting for the Clippers. Like, hopefully Ty Lue this year trusts Zoo a bit more, where I'm talking about just feature him. Give him the ball. Like, this is a guy that can be the
They're going to need to, honestly.
It's like we don't have the shot creators to not do it. So I think Zoo is going to be the breakout player, but more importantly, like if he's not, it can get really dicey. Like we can be a 9 seed because of that. That's the difference between, like I say, like our range to me is like 6 to 10, and like this is the difference between being 6 and like potentially shaking things up versus like being right in the middle of the play-in if we don't get Zoo enough to where we give him a real chance at being this breakout guy. But yeah, like I don't think what he did against the Mavericks was a fluke. I genuinely do believe like that is something that's in the cards for him. Like I said earlier, can Zoo be a 30-minute game guy without fouling, while still being a great defender? And yeah, like if we do feature him, he's taking strides as a passer. He's actually taking a ton of strides as a passer. But if we do feature him, they're gonna run two at him. Versus like against the Mavericks, one of the reasons why he kind of broke out was the Mavericks were kind of like, yeah, Zoo's really good, but like we're gonna take our chances, like beat us like this, right? So we're staying home on Paul George, we're staying home on James Harden, beat us. And I don't think during the regular season that's going to be as if he becomes a featured player by like game 25, the scouting report is going to be like, okay, he's their guy. Like you don't double him, right? So how he passes out of doubles is going to be a thing. But yeah, no, I think Zoo is a prime candidate to be a breakout player, not just for the Clippers, but honestly for the NBA. He got a big deal, relatively speaking. He got a big deal this summer. And it's pretty well deserved. This is a guy that, if he's not a top 10 center, he's kind of right there on the outskirts of it. And yeah, the Clippers are going to need it.
All right. Defensive player of the year. Is this also going to Zoo, or are we giving this to Kawhi? Or somebody else? Chris Dunn, Derrick Jones Jr.?
I was going to say Zoo or DJ or Derrick Jones Jr.
Okay.
Kawhi, the thing with Kawhi is like, it's not as a consistent thing on a night-to-night basis with him.
Sure.
But like when he decides to, he's the best. He's going to be the best defender on the team, and he has a baseline of being like a really good defender. Like, but like when he's locked in, he's the best defender. But I think on a night-to-night basis, Derrick Jones and even Terrence Mann are going to be tasked with like guarding the other team's best wing a bit more than Kawhi, at least for most of the game. Maybe in the clutch that'll change, but I think
Kawhi roll more.
Yeah, like I think through the first 4 or 5 games, Terrence Mann was kind of hounding Luka in the playoffs, and Luka wasn't healthy, but Terrence Mann is a really good defender as well. He's a really talented defender. But yeah, I'll say Zoo. I'll say Zoo. Again, since he's been a Clipper, I've watched it. Like I remember. What was it? 2021, right? We picked up Serge Ibaka, and Serge started at the center for Zoo for a little bit, and we were one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And then they switched it, and then by the end of the season, I think we were like 10th in 2021 or somewhere around there. He's it. Like he's a drop big, but he can kind of make it tough on these guards that are gonna settle for like contested twos. At the rim, he's one of the best defenders in the league.
Yeah.
He's just flat out big. He's very big, and one of the things about him is he just doesn't get tired. Now that's going to be put to the test because like I said, this year he's going to be featured more on offense, and he's probably going to play the most that he had. So we'll see how that affects him. But yeah, quiet as it's kept, I think he's been the best defender on the Clippers for a little bit now.
Yeah. Which player this season? I think I know where we're going to go with this, but which player has the most to prove this season?
I'll go Harden.
Oh, okay. That's not where I thought you were going. Okay.
I'll go Harden. Because I think a lot of guys have a lot to prove with this group.
Fair.
Because I mean they lost Paul George, and like the variance in terms of where people have the Clippers. I've seen people say, like above the play-in. I've seen people say they're going to miss the play-in entirely. I'll go Harden because if I'm not mistaken, 16 a game last year. That was the lowest he's had since OKC, and this is pretty much it in terms of like, there's no Paul George. If you can still be a fringe all, and we're not even talking about shooting all-star. If you can still be a fringe all-star at the end of the season, how far do we get before mentioning All NBA with you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are those days completely over?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they aren't, I think the last part of his career looks a bit different than it's projecting to. And not only that, it helps the Clippers tremendously.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the reason why people are low on the Clippers is because, like, this is the guy that's the second best player on the team now, and yeah, it doesn't check out to be like, you just look at the teams that are fighting to break through in the West, and you look at their second best player. Nobody you. Who's the second best player on the Lakers, and how much did he average last year? Right? Who's the second best player on the Mavericks, and how much did
second
he
best player on
average
the
last
Kings, even the team that's like below the Clippers in my
year? Right?
ranking.
Yeah. So, and I hate to look at it like that because basketball is a bit deeper than like,
Sure.
who averaged more. But there's a baseline, and like, if your second best player can't average 20 a game,
mm-hmm.
the whole premise of what you're trying to do kind of gets thrown off in a violent way. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with Harden as the guy that's most improved because, I think last year a lot of people disagree, but I think he was the second best player on the Clippers. Just because I think he affected winning a bit more. Like, he made Zubac better. Like, he lifted the team with his shot diet in terms of like off the dribble shooting and drawing to and making plays for others. But now he's kind of bumped up into a different role in terms of being a scorer again. And I'm very anxious to see if that part of his game is gone. Did he average 16 a game last year because he had to split duties with Kawhi and Paul George as a scorer? Yeah. Or are your scoring days really that cooked and you're really on some like 10 assists, 15 a game, 16 a game guy? And if that's the case, then like I said earlier, the ending of his career is going to look a bit different. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Harden on that one.
And for any Kings fans mad at me for kind of, saying that the Kings' second best player is better than the Clippers and why are the Clippers still higher? Kawhi Leonard, Ty Lue, I trust the Clippers defense more. Like, that's enough of an explanation.
I'm glad you said Ty Lue. That's a big one for me too. That's the reason why, like, I still think there's a world where the Clippers finish top 6 because along with Harden, that nucleus of like Kawhi, Harden, and Ty Lue, I'll even add Jeff Van Gundy in there. Like, that is, and I'm really big on this, that is very responsible adult in the room basketball, like efficient basketball. Like, you just know if they're healthy, they're not going to beat themselves. They're a bit older, so on some nights they just might not have it. But on the nights that they do have it, that's still going to be a really competitive team. And, this is a guy like Ty Lue. We didn't have in 2022. Paul George played 35 games. Kawhi Leonard played 0 games, and the Clippers still finished in 8th, and we're like 9 games above the 9th seed. Now, they didn't make the playoffs because Paul George didn't play in the play-in game versus the Pelicans, and they lost. But they finished top 8, and they finished with another winning season, even without Kawhi and Paul George, with Ty Lue at the helm.
Yeah.
So Ty Lue, he's one of the best at what he does, man. And so, that's a pretty nice nucleus to go into battle with.
And I did, give him his props during the breakdown, but I'll say it here again. Like, Ty Lue, he's not a perfect coach by any means, but he kind of suffers from the what'd you say?
I said, no, definitely not a perfect coach. He's
But
great though. He's great though. No.
he's great, but he kind of like suffers from the same thing Spo suffered from for a while, where it's the post LeBron coach syndrome, where it's you win a ring with LeBron, you separate from LeBron, and now the narrative is, oh well, you're good because you have LeBron next to you. Where it's like, okay, that he coached with LeBron or for LeBron or whatever, or however you want to phrase that. But like legitimately, he's one of the best coaches in the league, and it took Spo having some god awful teams and elevating
Yeah,
them
man.
to like insane heights. And I thought we kind of got past that point with Ty Lue, what would have been that 21-22 season. And it's still kind of at this point where I don't always feel he gets the credit. He gets the credit that he deserves. Because if we're talking like singular, like one game, I need you to like out scheme somebody. Man, the amount of shit that Ty Lue could just throw at the wall is
He's an offensive genius, man. He's I mean, a lot of people don't like him, but he comes from the Doc Rivers tree.
Yeah.
Doc Rivers is like an offensive genius. Like I've seen Doc Rivers turn water to wine with like, you know, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell is your best players, and you almost win 50 games. Like that's
you take
that
prime
me,
Warriors to 6 games in the playoff series. Tobias Harris is your leading scorer.
You know what I mean? Like, so Ty Lue comes from that, and you know it sucks that it takes those type of moments for your coach to get the respect they deserve. Like, you know, you're in the playoffs, it's 2-2 versus the 1 seed, and Kawhi Leonard blows his knee out, and you got to make it out of that series, and they do. And then they take the Suns to 6, and now it's like, oh, you know, Ty Lue gets the most out of his guys, and it's like, yeah, you shouldn't have to be in hell to get like your credit, but I mean, sometimes that it does take that, but yeah, no, Ty Lue, the best thing I can say about him is um, there's a quote that says one of the players on the Clippers once said it. They said Ty Lue can punch you in the chest without leaving a scar or something like that. And you know, the best example I can say of that is, you know, it's Game 7, it's Warriors Cavaliers, and he's cussing LeBron out at the half, like, yo, Draymond Green is killing you. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, he's not afraid to challenge anybody. But like, if you watch the Clippers on a night to night basis,
he's not going to bring it for a Tuesday night back to back against the Charlotte Hornets.
You know, he's not. And like with every coach, he has his crutches. He kind of like I think he kind of went away from it last year, but he leans a bit too much on small ball for my liking. But
yeah,
that's kind of what
that's been the Ty Lue thing.
You know, that's if you know a Ty Lue team, you know at some point he's gonna go small.
All right, Nick puts him at the 5 minutes. Let's go.
You know, and it's like Nick Batum is like 50 now. But
do this shit again.
I love that we have Nicholas Batum back for sure. But yeah, no, offensively is where Ty Lue shines. Like he'll you know, coaching is one thing that I kind of shy away from talking about because like I'm not, you know what I mean? People talk about coaching sometimes and I'm just like, yeah, do you know what a floppy is? Like you're calling this coach bad, but like you know what I mean? So I don't really.
It's always about the same things. It's only about rotations and timeout usage. It's never about anything actually. All right, it's never anything real.
It's never anything real when criticizing coaching. Like, you know, they came out with a list. I think I forgot what.
You talk about the CBS list, which is so bad.
Like, Mazzulla is like outside of the top 10, and I'm just like, see, that goes back to what we were talking about. Like his team is so good that we can't even give Mazzulla credit. And if you were to ask someone why Mazzulla isn't a top 5 coach in the league, you know they don't have an answer for it. But you know, my whole thing with coaching is I always say, you know how hard it is to make the NBA. There's like only 450 of those guys. There's literally only 30 head coaches. So you got to be even better as a head coach. So I think every coach in the NBA, every head coach in the NBA, every assistant coach in the NBA, these guys have been doing it for 30 plus years. I think all of them are fantastic, and the difference is kind of on the margins.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite trait of a coach is how malleable are you? You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and this is my favorite trait. Like, Ty Lue is a genius at this, and he has enough courage to do it. It's in the playoffs. You go into the playoffs, and this is what you want to run. This is what you do, and it's like, okay, Luka Doncic is on fire. The whole playbook, throw it out. Like nothing
Mm-hmm.
works. Are you willing to go away from what you know to do
Are
what
you
works?
willing to not be stubborn?
Right. And like I've seen him start Pat Beverly in a series, and then in the next series, Pat Beverly doesn't even play. Like
Yeah.
he'll do whatever to give your team the best chance. And like that is something Doc Rivers won't do. That is something that some of the more veteran coaches won't do. They kind of die on their sword. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's like the biggest difference between coaches because all of these guys know the game. Like all of these guys
Mm-hmm.
have been around the game long enough. So yeah, I'm a big Ty Lue guy. It sucks that he hasn't had the best chance to prove himself because every
Yeah.
playoff, his best player or best players are hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad the Clippers kind of restored that faith. He got a big deal this summer as well, and he deserves it. And hopefully, he does get a chance to where like his best players are on the floor come playoff time, and he
Yeah.
can really flex what he's great at.
So really quickly to kind of wrap up the coaching point. First off, you guys are supposed to, not re-sign him and let him walk over, 30 minutes downtown or whatever.
That was scary for a little bit because I was like, man, like if he gets loose, I was thinking like Lakers or Phoenix are gonna jump on this, and but no, I kind of knew like he's really good with Frank and Ballmer. Like those guys weren't
Yeah.
letting him go. And
Yeah.
the only thing was like you knew when Monty got his bag, you knew when Spo got his bag. You just
Yeah.
knew like as long as the Clippers come correct with the money, he isn't going anywhere.
He's
And
staying.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm glad he's still with us.
But to fully like wrap a bow on this coaching discussion, I have Ty Lue sixth of my coaching rankings, which do like help like bump a team score or whatever up or down or whatever. Speaking of Missoula, he's tied seventh for me, so I have him like
Okay.
firmly in the top 10. Here to read off the top 7 or whatever, top 8 because he's tied with one other guy.
Mm,
It's Bo, Mike Malone,
yeah.
Nick Nurse, Pop Still, Dangnall from OKC, Ty Lue, Joe Mazzulla, Steve Kerr.
All of those guys are terrific. I gotta know what's the rationale behind Pop though, right? Like Pop, he lost Kawhi, and like I don't again like I don't really Pop knows the game, and Pop's precedence is one of like he's Pop, like he's one of the I think that what was that the top 10, top 12 all time coaching thing came out a few years ago, and he Popovich is Popovich, but like man, I just he just is he just the Spurs have been irrelevant for a while now. I mean, he lost Kawhi, and
kind of lost the Spurs
but like
after
it's
that.
not fair because like they haven't really had the roster to compete. But that's an interesting one. I'm not gonna lie to you.
The Pop thing is for sure like partially benefit of the doubt. Like, all right, you're Pop. We're gonna give you some slack. Hopefully now you have a somewhat competent team again. Like we can get back to proving me right, I guess here.
What I will say about Pop is if you one thing you know about him is like he doesn't need a ton, right? Like those classic Spurs teams are looked at as like championship all time teams. But like how many top 50 players of all time do they have?
Yeah.
Right? Like Tony Parker is not a top 50 player of all time.
It's Tim Duncan.
Nobody's not a top
David
50
Robinson.
player. Like, yeah, and like by the time they started winning chips, David Robinson was
gone.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Like
or just not good anymore.
Right. And so yeah, he's time and time again, he has shown that when he's at the helm, if you give him competence, he can make some stuff happen. But he just got lucky with Wemby again. Like when Wemby went to the Spurs, I was like, no way. He was about to leave the game for good, and it's like, oh, here we go again. So
he's gonna be
they're
on his
actually a
deathbed before he retires.
Popovich and Chris Paul.
Yeah.
Another leap from Wemby, and as long as Chris Paul, you get enough games from Chris Paul. I'm a Chris Paul fan, but like,
Yeah.
you get enough games from Chris Paul with Popovich at the helm. Another step from Wemby, and I don't know where I have him, but I like the Spurs. I like him. I like him.
Yeah.
So, and part of that is Pop. So I guess I'm kind of more in agreement with you than not.
All right, let's wrap this up then. And the Clippers, I think we've kind of answered this question throughout the episode, but the Clippers make the playoffs if, finish the sentence.
I can't answer. The Clippers make the playoffs if Kawhi Leonard plays at least 65 games and Harden averages 20 points a game efficiently.
Yeah, I think that's the main takeaway for sure.
Yeah, if that happens, I'm pretty confident in them because I was thinking about this earlier, and we kind of mentioned it, bro. The West is just so jumbled up. Like, if Kawhi Leonard is playing 65 games in a season and James Harden is averaging 20, I don't look at the Western Conference and say, hey, who's the, you know what I mean? Like, the fifth seed last year just made the finals, right? Like, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are fantastic, but like, they're also Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Like, this isn't prime Golden State, where they are just vastly superior than the field. So yeah, you get a good help, and a lot of people think that's a crazy takeaway for Kawhi to play that many games. But like, he's coming off a season where he played 69 games.
Right.
And there's some stuff that went on with the Olympics, but like, Kawhi and his camp and the Clippers camp, they were ready to play, right? So that kind of lets me know that hopefully that's behind him. And I don't really, when it comes to Kawhi Leonard, I'm not really thinking about, I mean, I am. I don't want to say I'm not, but like, it's playing in the playoffs. I do think, I trust you'll get enough games from Kawhi in the regular season to where the Clippers are in a real fight to make the playoffs. Where if you just get if Terrence Mann takes a jump, if you get a jump from them, then, because like, I think in period, I think that I have the Clippers in the playoffs. But my whole thing is, as a fan, is like, how can we get top six? Because like, as a Clipper fan, I've been in the play-in. You're a Laker fan. You've been in the play-in in recent years. That is some danger. The play-in is dangerous, man. And
you have Zion turning into 40-point like.
Dude, like,
it gets dangerous.
It gets dangerous, man, because Kawhi Leonard is an all-world player. You get in the play-in, and you just happen to have a game where he's just not making shots, and now the season is over. It just gets really dangerous. So I want to avoid the play-in at all costs, because I do know what can happen if we finally get to the playoffs and Kawhi is healthy. All bets are off. So as long as we can get to the playoffs in one piece, and I think a lot of that is going to have to do with avoiding the play-in. So yeah, I mean, if you get enough games from Kawhi Leonard and Harden kind of returns to form as a scorer, that kind of lessens the pressure on the surrounding parts to take a big step. So if those things happen, I'll have the Clippers in my playoff field.
All righty. Well, Jamal, this has been the longest, but also probably one of my favorite interviews we've been able to get for this series so far. So thanks so much for hopping on with me, bro. This is a blast. And, hopefully, the Lakers sweep the Clippers this year. Yeah, looking forward to that.
I mean, let's kind of chill on that, because I mean, outside of last year, it's been going the other way when it comes.
We don't
to
have
Lakers
to talk about that.
And even last year, the Lakers won like 3 of the 4 games, I think, or something like that. And every game, the Lakers were down by like 15 or 20 again.
Again, we don't have to talk about that. That's irrelevant.
But
Who needs
I'll
that
leave with this,
information?
man. I'll leave with this, man. I'm very grateful and appreciative of you having me on, man. I always look for a fix where I can talk basketball, and I'm sorry I held you for so long, bro. But like,
No, you're good. This is fun.
I could talk about this all day, man. So yeah, no, thank you for having me on. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. I think media day is in like 11 days, so it's about that
Yeah.
time. It's about to get cracking for sure. So thank you so much, man, for having me on for sure, bro.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure you guys go follow all Jamal's great work. I'll make sure I include some of this places you guys can follow him at in the description below. And yeah, we are on and pumping. This is dropping today on Friday. And number 16 will drop sometime this weekend as well. So we got to crank this series out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.
Yes, sir.